Welcome to Walpole Five-0. I'm Chief John Carmichael. Today is January 10th, 2017, and thank you for joining us. Go over a couple of things. Initially, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to train with the National Attorney General Training Resource Institute and Attorney General Maura Healey this past week, which was a very good training opportunity that they held in Boston. Part of what I was there to train about and to teach police officers, health people, people from hospitals in Boston, that type of thing, who attended this training was mostly about the Good Samaritan law. And I've brought this up before, but the Good Samaritan law protects people when they call 911 in the event of an overdose. And it protects the people who are calling in good faith, and it also protects the victim against charges such as possession of those drugs once the police arrive. So what we're really trying to do, we're trying to get the message out, and that's part of what this training was about, was to please call 911 during an overdose. We're still seeing, apparently across Massachusetts, only a 40 to 50% call ratio where they're actually calling 911. And so it's a really good thing to get that education out there to make sure that we're doing that. The other thing is not to hang up. You call 911, stay on the phone. There's emergency medical dispatch where dispatchers will give instructions, and it's best to stay on the phone. Don't leave. Don't abandon the person. Don't try to clean up, because what happens is what we see in this region is heroin, but also fentanyl. And fentanyl's transdermal. It'll go right through your skin. You can inhale it. And if the person who took that drug or inhaled that drug is now on the ground in severe medical distress, that's not something that you want to be exposed to. So don't hang up. Don't leave. Don't try to clean up the scene. Stay on the line, and it can do wonders to help save people that are suffering from an overdose. And that's what that was all about. So great training. Car breaks, we are continuing to see car breaks, not as many as we have in the past few weeks, but since September we've seen 60-plus car breaks in Walpole. And as I've mentioned before, lock your doors, safeguard your property is the biggest thing, the biggest preventative measure that you can use in this case. This past week we've had some breaks on High Street, Monomy Lane, Metacomet, and Forsythia. In one of those car breaks also somebody was able to access Adderall, which Adderall prescription drug. So please continue to keep your doors locked. The officers are being very vigilant in trying to identify who's responsible for this. We did have an arrest last week, but the car breaks continue. Another quick thing to mention is I kind of got thrown into the marijuana issues again this past week. The Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts heard a case, Commonwealth versus Gerhardt, and this is a case that could potentially make Massachusetts roads less safe. And what the SJC is looking at is whether or not, first of all, if there's a correlation between marijuana use and impaired driving, which I believe there is, and I think that all the studies and the research would show that there is. The other thing is there a correlation between the field sobriety testing the police officers currently use in Massachusetts and impairment. So the tests that a police officer would do on the roadside, does that correlate with impairment, and does it show that? And there are certain things that police officers look for. Now, the original standard field sobriety tests were overseen by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they were basically to measure alcohol impairment. However, that we've always used these same tests and similar tests when doing OUI because of drug impairment. And the courts have accepted that there's a judicial standard that's been set. However, there really isn't a whole lot of scientific support and research that supports it in the same way that alcohol is. There are observations that are unique to marijuana: bloodshot eyes, dilated pupils, lack of convergence in both eyes, eyelid tremors, and even the odor of marijuana might be an indicator. But if the SJC goes against this case here, and police officers lose field sobriety testing in its current state right now, I don't know what police officers are going to do at this time to try and deal with OUI drugs. It could put us in a very difficult situation, and it could put people at risk on our roadways. So hopefully, if the SJC does go against this, there'll at least be some guidelines as to what we're supposed to do. The timing couldn't be worse. We just legalized this drug. increased access and availability. We know in Washington and Colorado that crashes have gone up significantly. Fatal crashes have gone up, so now we're kind of left trying to deal with this problem, and hopefully we'll come out okay. Injured officers. So in the past few weeks, there's been 3 Walpole police officers injured in motor vehicle crashes due to somebody striking the vehicle that they were driving in. And on both occasions, 2 different incidents, the individuals that struck those police officers left the scene. So it was a hit-and-run accident. Again, last night, and I shouldn't say accident, it's a hit-and-run crash, and it's deliberate that they left the scene. But this most recent one, the one a couple of weeks ago, was with Officer Pylon, who was struck when a person that was impaired due to alcohol struck his vehicle and fled the scene. The officers caught up with that individual and placed him under arrest. This past week, just yesterday, Monday, we had 2 undercover detectives that were in an unmarked car. They were sitting at the red light on High Plains Street at Washington Street. There was a pizza delivery man that pulled in behind the detectives, and another 3rd vehicle came in and struck the pizza delivery driver from behind, which in turn caused a chain reaction. That vehicle struck the vehicle that the detectives were in. Now, it's a soft car. There are no lights. There's no sirens in this vehicle. The officers sustained minor injuries, mostly like whiplash type of injuries. However, another officer that was right there and right at the scene passed the crash and went to turn around to come back and keep the scene safe. And as he did that, the suspect vehicle pulled away from the crash, pulled up next to our officers, waved, and then took off, taking a right turn onto Washington Street and fleeing the scene. This individual drove at a high rate of speed. He was passing vehicles on Washington Street. Ultimately, he ended up pulling over in Norwood as the 2 officers, the 2 detectives that were injured, followed them, got into Norwood, and they ultimately were able to place that individual under arrest. You know, it never ceases to amaze me that it seems that we're having more of these, more hit-and-run crashes, and it's difficult to understand that you could cause a crash, you know that you caused a crash, there's likely injury involved in this crash, and that your decision is to drive away. I can't figure it out. It seems to be happening more and more. In fact, I think we're going to look at our crashes right here in Walpole and see if we can figure out the percentage of how many of these are hit and runs. But anyways, we arrested this individual from Norwood, charged him with leaving the scene of personal injury, operating after suspension of his license, speeding, marked lanes violations, and negligent operation. During the interview with this individual afterwards, he indicated that the reason why he did not stop was because his driver's license had been suspended and he didn't want to get arrested, which is hardly any reason to flee the scene. So on January 4th, 2017, reported of a larceny, and this occurred at Walpole Wine and Spirits, and they were able to establish some video of a black male or Hispanic male in his 20s wearing a white sweatshirt, white sweatsuit, like a running type sweatsuit. And he ran out of the store with a significant cost bottle of alcohol. And that individual fled the scene on foot. I have a picture of him from the surveillance video, and so I can just show that up. Okay, so this individual walked into the store, stole some merchandise, fled the scene on foot. And we are currently looking to identify that individual so that we can help Walpole Wine Spirits and identify this person and charge them with that theft. Officer Taylor Bethany is investigating this case. We have received information that this individual may frequent the Key High, and he possibly rides a bicycle around town. So that's just some added information in there. But if anybody knows who that individual is, please contact the Walpole Police and specifically Officer Bethany. We took a report of threats on January 5th. This was in Swan Pond. It was these were threats that were made telephonically to between boyfriend and girlfriend. wasn't a big deal, but I put that in the report this week. A crash. We responded to a possible hit and run again. This was possibly involving a pedestrian on Lincoln Road. Upon further review, upon arrival of the officers, it was discovered that nobody was hit by a vehicle, that it had only been a verbal altercation between a motorist and a pedestrian in that area. Warrant of arrest on that day, Officers Benner and Thayer were working as a plainclothes assignment. They were observed vehicle up off of Mansion Drive who was operating radically. They stopped this vehicle for multiple motor vehicle infractions, and during that time they discovered that the individual, William Duff, had a warrant out of Brockton, an outstanding warrant for their arrest, and the officers placed him under arrest up on Mansion Drive. Credit card fraud, Detective Toland, Detective Sullivan, and Officer Giblin, they continued an investigation into a credit card fraud. This one here, the individual was observed in front of the Walpole Mall. They were able to obtain some surveillance video because somebody lost their credit card. This individual sees the credit card on the ground. He picks up the credit card, he puts it in his pocket, and walks away. So this credit card was later used at Walmart, and this individual went into Walmart. They purchased an $800 iPhone, as well as had placed an order for some more merchandise. So we were able to get some surveillance video of that individual. We disseminated that around to area police departments, and we ended up getting a call from Norwood PD, who helped Detective Toland and Detective Sullivan identify an individual from Norwood who was responsible for taking that credit card and then using it fraudulently and basically racking up some charges. So thing with credit cards, this individual here, they knew they lost their credit card. When you do, if you have your wallet stolen, you have credit card information stolen, first thing is to report it to the police and to your credit card company so that they can put a flag on that card right away. What we see over and over again is people will steal these credit cards, and they know they got to use it quick. It's time sensitive. They got to get to a store quick, or they got to place some orders quick in order to use that card. And that's usually what we find is when these credit cards are stolen, within an hour, they are already racked up some significant charges. And many times what we see is they'll find a card, or they'll steal a card, and they'll just go right up and down Route 1 and go on a spending spree. So flag those credit cards as quick as you can if you find out that they're missing. On January 6th, suspended license officer Bethany summons an individual from Mendon for a license suspension. Obviously, she had the ability to either arrest that person or summons them in, and she chose to summons them in. Boston PD, this is kind of a strange call. We got a call from Boston PD. They reported a vehicle and they gave us the registration plate. That vehicle was leaving some part of the city and was identified as a Ford Escape. And when they ran that plate, somebody was able to get the registration plate. It came back to an individual registered, and the car was registered at 972 Main Street. And yes, if you know what 972 Main Street is, that's the Walpole Police Station. So this individual, obviously with ill intent, decided to register their car and use our address of the Walpole Police Department. So it kind of threw us off. But we do have an identification on this individual. Boston PD is working to solve those B&Es because of where this vehicle was in Boston. He does not live here, though. So an arrest, officers Benner and Bethany. Taylor Bethany was very busy this week. They arrested an individual at Longview Farm. This was for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and they was also charged with wanton damage, that being a window that was down at that facility. This is a juvenile that was arrested and had assaulted somebody with an object, tore somebody's shirt, and then broke a window. So that individual was placed under arrest, transported here, and ultimately turned into the juvenile probation officer who ended up releasing the subject from here. Security check. Officer Vinciguerra discovered some teenagers hanging around Adams Farm during a security check. They were FIO'd, which is field interview observation. This has just been a hotspot area because of the tagging incident that I showed you last week, where somebody tagged the barn at Adams Farm, and so we've been doing some extra checks there. And in this case, the kids turned out to be fine. They weren't involved in anything, but we FIO'd them and sent them on their way. We got a report of an intoxicated female. Also on the 6th, Officer Haber responded to the area of the Walpole Mall We got reports that this was an intoxicated female. However, when we got there, and this does happen quite often, we were able to determine that it wasn't somebody that was intoxicated or impaired in any way. They were actually had a medication issue and a medical issue that they were suffering from. They were able to stabilize her there at the scene and then have her son pick her up. So sometimes the way the calls come in and what they actually are can be two different things. Saturday, January 7th, Officer Benner conducted community policing. He did some outreach at Fisher School. And also on that day, Daisy Troop came in and visited. Officer Lagoa, Vinciger, and Powers helped the girls through the police station to give them a tour of the building, and they had a very good time. And we always love to see that stuff. A lot of kids come in and tour the building. And starting April 1st this year, we plan on breaking ground for the new police station where we'll be on South Street. And looking into the future, I can't wait till we can actually do those station tours in a new facility, and we really look forward to that. Officer Kevlich took a report of identity theft. That was on Riverside Place. We've been getting a lot of those lately, and many times, not a whole lot we can do about them, but you need to report them so that we can help you out with other issues that might come up because of your identity being stolen. But if there are cases where they've used your identity to purchase credit cards or to use your credit cards fraudulently, we can help you with that, because you're probably going to need the police report when you end up notifying the companies involved. Officer Moriarty, Kevlich, and Benner dealt with a assault of male. This was on Gay Ave. It was an individual who was out of control. The officers were able to gain control of the individual down there. This ended up being a transport to Norwood Hospital, and just based on their discretion at the scene. As you know, many times, if it's a mental health issue, we can try and get them resources, and we try to avoid arrest at all costs if it's if you can, and go the resource route, because we find out that's a much better way to handle things. There were several motor vehicles accidents, crashes, also on Saturday, January 7th with the weather. You always remind us, slow it down. I know it's winter time. We usually get a few snowstorms under our belt, and then we can kind of, you see the crashes go down. But usually December, January, that's when we have most of our crashes. We got to slow it down. Everybody kind of gets into the groove again. Retrain ourselves how to drive in the snow, and then they kind of taper off again. So use caution out there in driving. January 8th, a report of a pedestrian in the roadway. This individual was found to be impaired, and the officers just transported this person home. Remember, under protective custody, you can take somebody home, you can take them to a facility, you can take them to the police station, and if there's somebody home that can help out with that, then we can take them home. Motor vehicle crash involving, it happened to one of our town plows, and it was this vehicle was driving too fast for the weather conditions and ended up sliding into the plow, Main and Common Street. Nobody was injured in that, which is always good, because the trucks and the plows can cause a lot of damage. The big thing with that is give them some room, because those plows are out there. Those guys are out there working over 16 hours. They're working in tough weather conditions. They're cold. They've been out there a long time. They're tired. Give them some room to work with, and that can go a long way as far as that's concerned. January 7th, we had, I don't get into the domestics and the restraining orders and that stuff for obvious reasons. There's no need to, but we had some multiple calls on that on January 7th. Other than that, it was fairly quiet. Today, January 10th, we had one significant incident. This was at Longview Farm as well. It was an arrest for assault and battery, dangerous weapon. One resident stabbed another resident with a pencil. It appears that this was unprovoked, and as a result, that individual who was placed under arrest, transported to the Walpole police station to be booked. And then that will also be transferred over to DCF. We'll notify DCF as well as DYS and juvenile probation, and then they will make a determination on where this individual will be placed from this point on. But in an unprovoked issue like that, obviously there needs to be something done as far as a case like that. So that is, I mean, pretty quiet week considering how things have been going. And I want to wish, we do have 3 police officers that are still out injured, as I mentioned, and I hope that they have a very quick recovery and get back to work soon. I know the officer that was involved in the first incident is doing much better. He's scheduled to come back very soon, and the other 2 detectives who were both put in a difficult position yesterday and are injured, hope that they get well very soon and have a quick recovery as well and get back to work, because they are sorely missed. But so thank you very much. This is Walpole 5-0, and I'm Chief John Carmichael. Thank you.